All right, so here's the agenda that we typically run through. The first is just 2 slides. Who is Schneider Electric? I don't like to beat the consultant community up over kind of our large corporation, but it is really relevant in a couple different levels. What I'm going to emphasize a bit more today than I normally do is what our world is becoming and why this is relevant. This is where we get into some of the conversations that you can have to steer your customers in the direction of EcoStruxure and IP-enabled field controls. Innovation at every level is where we start talking about our product and services. We've been talking a lot about product and services, so I'm going to hit some high points for what might be relevant to the design community from what we've seen in conversations. And then lastly, again, the most important part of this is the human component. So we'll talk about our partner channel, our eco-expert experience, and also the proficient group that I work with and my team on the CES end of things. Okay? So when we talk about Schneider Electric, there's a couple things that I think are really worth mentioning. 145,000 people is a large company, right? And $30 billion thereabouts is a large sum of money. If you take 5% of that and you throw it into R&D, which we do, that's $1.5 billion that we spend to do the things that we're doing right now in terms of updating software, getting hardware where it needs to be, making sure that we're on the front edge of technology and we're setting the pace for other companies out there that we compete with. And I really like to bring that point home. Based in Paris, CEO sits in Hong Kong, but we have the same amount of representation in the US. And we automate lots of different systems with our EcoStruxure platform. So we'll be talking specifically about EcoStruxure for buildings. We also have data centers, industrial, grid, anything that you could digitize over time, we are digitizing with this platform approach, with the view of a future where there is less separating those historically disparate segments. The grid and buildings and data centers, all of that stuff, we're bringing that together under the Schneider Electric umbrella. And then when you go into that building sphere where 43% of our business comes from and kind of where all of us live, you can imagine how important this slide is to show to the engineering community where, of course, they're going to walk into all types of different buildings and might not know that these are all under our corporate strategy and all companies that we own. So we talk about a lot of that stuff over these past few days. Again, we'll be focusing on EcoStruxure building. Square D is a huge one. Everybody's familiar with Square D when you go out to the engineering or design community. Pelco security cameras, Access Expert. I see Nick standing back there. We mentioned that within the presentation. Where we can start talking about things like Can2Go and Viconics for wireless. We really have a great portfolio of offerings within buildings, and that helps position us at the early part of this conversation as a leader in terms of the technology we work with and the partners that we have, the companies that we own. And like I said, at that point, that's all I really want to impart about Schneider Electric and kind of the corporate side of things, and then really get into what are the trends that are driving the things that we've been talking about these past 2 days, right? What is our world becoming, and why is this all so relevant? And the best place to start is a value proposition. We're all in the business of providing value, and we're kind of reconstituting the way that we're thinking about how we provide value to customers. And the way we kick this off is by mentioning this 330-300 concept, which is being pioneered by the folks at Jones Lang LaSalle. And at a high level, before I get into anecdotes, what it does is basically says, utilities, where we've focused a lot of our sales efforts in the past, will save you energy, will make you 30% more efficient, et cetera, is actually, in this context, $3 per square foot versus $30 per square foot for real estate and $300 per square foot for people. The way Jones Lang LaSalle has come up with this is basically said, all right, if we're looking for tenants in a 50-story office building, and we want to put ourselves in the shoes of the people that we would like to be tenants on the 18th floor, then their annual costs that they look at over the course of the year are actually distributed in this format, which should open a lot of eyes here, right? Because if we're focusing on ASHRAE and utilities and all that stuff, which is very, very important and will never go away, that tenant is actually focusing on the people that are within that space. And I actually had a great conversation with Jeff Day yesterday. Jeff, you are here, right? And it stuck with me throughout the night, so I'm just warning you. Where I said, hey, Jeff, how's this going for you? What are you learning? Are the products and services looking pretty cool? How's the event? And his feedback was, all of this that we're doing, from the little aliens on the table to the whole rollout of the MPXs and stuff like that, is to unlock the intelligence and creativity of the people in the room. And he actually said, these are 200 of the smartest people you'll find in the room, right? I'm paraphrasing. But that is what he said. This whole thing is about unlocking. He was focusing on the people. So we're providing something that unlocks your organizations to help you do business. And you are taking this package, and you're going to your customers, and you're essentially doing the same thing. The value that you're providing to them is so that they can unlock the value, creativity, and intelligence of their people in their office. And it also, we should be proud of that. Buildings it's an incredibly important industry, and what you're doing is super relevant. Really depressing stat. Does anybody know how much time the average American spends indoors during the course of their life? What do you think that percentage is? 87% of our lives are spent indoors in buildings. And if you put cars and stuff like that into the equation, or transportation, it's 91% that we spend not outside, which is really sad and depressing. But the opportunity that we have at Schneider, and that you guys have as the contractors and installers and partners, is to make life better for people. And that's really how we should be thinking about this. So when we say, okay, and I'm really going to belabor this slide because I think it's very important. Why does this matter for technology? It's not just a millennial thing. As I look around the room, very clearly we're all millennials here, right? I mean, all of us, there's a ton of us. We love kale smoothies. We're crushed by student loans. 20 to 30% of us will be moving out of our parents' homes this year, right? We all feel the same struggle. But there are people who aren't millennials who have the same type of connectivity desire and appetite, are technologically connected and advanced. As I understand it, if we were here 15 to 20 years ago, people wouldn't have had smartphones. They wouldn't be checking emails all the time. They wouldn't have used Waze to get here. They would have put a big old map over their steering wheel, stuff like that. So we're all connected. And every company is looking to make that experience better for people that are within the facility. And I'm going to be honest, I lied. We're not all millennials in here, right? So I think a blind spot in our organization might be actually looking at millennials and thinking about that is really who is going to be in the buildings that we're designing today. And what's important about millennials is that we're the first generation to really grow up with technology. I've got another question for you. In what year will millennials make up the largest, they'll be the largest generation share of the workforce? So you've got Gen X, baby boomers, millennials. In what year will millennials be the largest members of the workforce in the United States? It happened in 2015, so it's already the largest percentage. And that's not indicative of this room or our industry. So I think it can be a blind spot for us. When we're working with technology, the idea is there's going to be a higher appetite for technological connectivity, and that is what's going to kind of drive demand for our customers in filling these spaces. And one last thing before I move on from this slide. As a millennial, I still can remember a world where we got our computer when I was like 10 or 11. I got my first cell phone when I was 16. I got a smartphone when I was in grad school. If you're born within the last 10 years, if you're 7 or 8 years old now, you've never known a world without high-speed internet connectivity. And there's not much differentiation for you between running water, electricity, and the internet. So we really need to put ourselves in that perspective when we have these conversations with our customers, and they say, why do I need to move to IP-enabled field controls? Why do I need to be future-proofed? It's because a 7-year-old will be in college in 11 years, and will be in the workforce in 13 or 14 years. That's the life of these systems, and that's really why this is so important. So I spent more time on that than I normally do with the engineering community, but I think it's the type of conversations that we could be having with our developers and designers. I think it's that important. 3 big mega trends. One of it is the digital connectivity. I think I've hit that one pretty good. Another one is world population. So every day throughout the world, 3 million people each day move from a non-urban environment into an urban environment. And obviously that plays out really largely on the global end of things. In the Northeast, all of us have these markets, whether it's in Buffalo and it's Larkin Square and you're doing the live, work, play thing, or you've got Schuylkill Yards in Philly, Hudson in New York, you've got Seaport in Boston. All of us have this sort of, let's find this live, work, play balance for people that are constantly moving to the cities. All of us have new hospitals that are trying to be cutting edge. In Philadelphia, There's a reason that we're leading with MPX controllers in beta. It's because people are moving to cities and we have to support that. And then climate change and regulation, the stark reality of that, and then also the regulations and the new companies that we'll have to be working with, and new technologies that we'll have to be incorporating are all mega trends that are driving us in our product design. So that's really why we're doing all the stuff that we're here to talk about this week. Maybe. There we go. I don't want to belabor the point too much on the digital end of things, although I do believe it's the major driver and what we should be aware of. In buildings, we can still be much, much more efficient. We have to be, and we will continually be asked to be by the design community. Every mechanical engineer is looking to be as efficient as possible. They have standards in place that are driving them in that direction, whether that's 62.4, 90.1, all of the stuff that we should be talking to them about, higher level sequences of operations and how we can really be consultative with that community. As we look at a digital future, we should not forget about the fact that we've got unrealized potential in building efficiency. And then this one, and Allison, I'm going to ask you to find Joe Metcalf because I teed this up earlier. Is she in here? All right. In a second, I'm going to throw down the alley and you slam the oop, all right? When we talk about disruptive technologies, and kind of like that buzzword, we hear disruption, and it's one of those things that you hear it enough that you kind of forget what it actually means and what it's doing. Any type of disruption that you see follows this paradigm, typically, which is a combination of mobility, cloud, sensing, and analytics. And we've seen some of that here in our industry over these past few days. We will continue to see that. It's pretty cool sometimes to step back and consider where we are in the context of what's happening in the world. But there are all sorts of industries where this has played out. And for those of you who have gone on these presentations with me, you know an example I like to use often is the music industry. The music industry was a product or service that forever went from the gramophone to vinyls and 8-tracks and tapes and CDs and the iPod and the iPhone, all that stuff, all those enhancements, all those improvements, and was replaced by this model, which is a combination of mobility, cloud, sensing, and analytics. And that's something like a Spotify or Pandora, a streaming service. You can hear any song you want on your phone. Anything that's been made in the world is now available to you via the cloud. That service is going to sense what you like. So when Brad listens to a lot of Taylor Swift, it recommends a lot of Rihanna for him, that kind of thing. It'll run kind of analytics on you and make those recommendations. That's really what we're doing with things like Building Advisor. This morning, I was reading the news, and this is what I'm going to kick over to Joe. He's going to read it on the mic back there. I didn't want to look on my phone. But today is actually a huge day for this thing I've been talking about for years. So could you actually read the news here?
This just in. Online music streaming becomes industry's biggest moneymaker. Online streaming services like Spotify and Apple Music have overtaken CD and digital download sales to become the recording industry's largest revenue source, according to Global Music Report 2018, released Tuesday. Rapid growth for streaming music services has helped the music industry post its third year of revenue growth, with a total recorded music revenue rising 8.1% in 2017 to $17.3 billion. Streaming expanded by 41%, accounting for 38% of the industry's revenue, up from 29% in 2016. Music sales fell by 40% over the 15 years ending in 2014 as music file sharing services eroded CD sales. And revenues for 2017 were just 68.4% of the market's 1999 peak. Back to you, Tyler.
So that's 20 years, right? So that just came out this morning, and it's incredibly relevant for what disruption is, and it's happening everywhere. This model has been repeated in movies with Netflix. It's what Uber is, taking away using cab on the cash to get a cab. Every industry is being displaced by this model. We can expect to see more and more of this in buildings when we have a smart platform in place. The reason that we're doing these IP controls is to be able to take that information and make sure that we're not losing 40% market share versus some new service. We need to be nimble and moving with that, and it's going to continue to happen in our industry, right? So what are we doing in those models? We talked about one of them, which is Building Advisor. Andrew Tansky talked about it yesterday. This is one of those type of apps, analytics, and services. we're connecting with the cloud. We're collecting all that data every 5 minutes. We're analyzing it at scale via the cloud and all of the opportunity we have there. We're then proactively taking action. So we can now prioritize those alarms that we were typically chasing around as a facility manager in terms of energy, avoidable maintenance, and occupant comfort. We're smarter. We're using AI. We're using augmentation via those type of services. And that is what we can expect to keep seeing. So hopefully that paints a little bit of a picture for why this is important and some of the type of conversations we can have with developers, end users, the engineering community, whoever. And I'd be happy to join you if we had the opportunity to help you in any way, right? Are there any questions on that at this point? Because I really kind of wanted to focus on that because we've been talking a lot about some of the products and services that I'll get into. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Is this the type of thing that people are starting to come to you with a little bit more? Monday morning, I gave a presentation with Matt Green to a developer in Boston, and it was just about smart buildings. We can expect that the driving impetus for this technology is going to come from New York, Boston, DC, and Philly. So we want to make sure that we're out ahead of that. Cool. So here are the type of things that we talk to the engineering community about in terms of product. And this is probably the most important slide that we have to understand in terms of what our business proposition and value is. So I know we've seen the tech stack a lot. And again, it's almost like a term like smart building or disruption where you say, OK, it's the tech stack again. It's critically important to communicating how we're changing and why we're moving in the right direction. And we like to talk from a top down. My approach has been to actually start with where we've been, which is the edge. All of us have given presentations previously where you've got that one line at the top. It's got the automation server, the computers, the enterprise, and then it's got the backnet, the LAN, the proprietary network, the Modbus that goes down to all the different field controllers. That has been the end state for controls since I've been in the industry, which is almost 10 years. Now what's happening is that end use case, because of the fact that we're connecting via IP, via the internet and IP to the field controllers, it's giving us so much more capability to do apps, analytics, and services. So what the engineering community needs to understand is that from what has typically been the top level to the field controllers, we've been communicating at 78 kbps kilobaud rate, which has been good enough for any building that's ever been made, right? All of us have been doing backnet over MSTP. With this launch and where we're headed, we're now running that 100 meg speed over Cat5 cable, which is allowing us to move data at like 1,000x what we've done previously, and creates this platform and this ability for us to start leveraging a lot more out of our systems. That's what allows us to flip up to the new normal, which is our app studio, our advisor platforms, and really anything else that people can come up with and we can connect to via Smart Connector. So that's why this is so important, and I think like every engineer or developer we can talk to about that and spread that market message, we start to win because we're leading on that front. We're no longer putting ourselves in a position where in 8 to 10 years, when some new hotshot comes up with some indispensable technology, we don't have the infrastructure in place to implement that for our end user. When we think back to that customer experience, that occupant, that 90%, we want to prepare them with this platform for anything that could come down the line. So I mentioned, smartphones earlier. It's a great example of a smart platform. They've only been around for 10 years. I mean, the iPhone turned 10 this year. And what that did was it unlocked a platform that created immense value with things that we all use daily and kind of take for granted now. I mentioned Waze before, but Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, these are billion-dollar organizations that literally couldn't have existed until the platform was in place. And so what we need to have is this here, so that as somebody comes up with a hotel use case or an office building use case, we can say, via Smart Connector, through our service, we can connect to that, we're ready for it, and we can move along with you. That's really why this is so important. And when we talk about the IoT 30-second elevator pitch, that's what we want to be able to communicate and why we're here. I mentioned some product. Yes, sir.
One thing I'm struggling with, trying to understand, as far as the consulting engineering community, when we're trying to convince them of using the IP controllers for example, the IPv boxes, going along with the message you're giving and trying to explain to them that, you know, this is for preparing for the future and all that, what does having IPv box controllers really benefit the end user from the speed and being able to connect into the future? Because wouldn't we be able to use this platform anyway, even if they had MSTP controllers?
So you might be able to use one platform. They might want to come up with 2. They might eventually want to come up with 15. I think some of us have used, like I've sold building analytics before when I was in your shoes, and there were a lot of problems at times with slowing down the system, slowing down graphics, overburdening what's happening in the facility. And that's really just because of the infrastructure that's in place. When we can move that information and get to that kind of superhighway, as people have been referring to it this week, we no longer have to have that concern of, okay, we have Building Advisor, somebody comes up with something in 7 years that we need, someone comes up with something in 13 years, can we actually do it? That's no longer near the concern for us. Good question. Mentioned this slide with Pelco and Access Expert and all the things that we offer, Invensys, Candigo, all that stuff. This is a way of looking at some of the software platforms that we have, and this is where I start getting into almost like built-in native advertisement for other features and resources that we could bring through to support you all at your office. Building operation, obviously what I'm talking about right now. Brad will be giving a demo on that later. Building expert, Ralph Beaudry does a really good job of that with small buildings, 100,000 square feet or less. Energy expert and PME, we just talked to Lee Featherstone about that. He's been a great resource for me to bring in with some of my engineers to give demos and show how some of that stuff works. Data centers, I'm guessing that would be DJ Brennan. Access expert, we've got Nick Vizella back here, video expert for Pelco. So we have all of these suites of services that we like to present to the design community so that they're aware of how we approach an entire building. We all know that this is an important slide for the engineering community. I think a lot of us, from time to time, will still probably see some old school spec come out, and you're like, okay, I need to talk to the engineer. We really need to update these specifications. We're trying to move to a reality where it's EcoStruxure by Schneider Electric, and it could be Schneider Electric EcoStruxure by insert partner if you have that relationship, but we really want to move in that direction. And we also like to impart the information to them that if they come across a building that has Invensys and they're not exactly sure where to go, Schneider has made a concerted effort to future-proof, as we've been talking about, but also to make sure we don't leave people behind and connect those systems up to the latest and greatest via whatever transition path we can come up with that's right for the customer. Oftentimes, they might be more familiar with some of these lines than they are with EcoStruxure, and that's kind of why I have this job, is to go out and impart that market knowledge. But I think we're all aware of the fact that this clicks some light bulbs on for the engineering community when we discuss, hey, we own these companies, these are our products. Best-in-class cybersecurity, great example of something that we can talk to the engineering community about. They always, always, always bite off on this because they're concerned about it like we are. Most of them got into the mechanical engineering community because they liked cars when they were 17, right? They didn't know that they were going to have to get into a world where cybersecurity really mattered. And a lot of us are kind of figuring this stuff out as we go and determining how we can have that conversation with our customers. We talk about the C4 group. We talk about TLS, transport layer security. We talk about resetting passwords, having those policies in place, clickjacking, our defense in depth approach for cybersecurity. We really try and make the engineering community aware that the people they're working with on BAS need to have cybersecurity in their DNA. It can't just be like a side thing. And also, great way to limit competition and start putting that fear in their mind of, hey, I don't know about this outfit. I'm not quite sure about this control line they're asking to get listed. Also, great way to be consultative with the engineering community to talk to them about cybersecurity every 9 months or a year, because the bottom line is it's an evolving threat that's not going away, right? This is a great one. CEU presentation I can come in and give. We can have C4 come in and do their whole deal. But cybersecurity is a big topic right now for the engineering community. Graphics, we really hit on 2 things. Scalable vector graphics, I think we're all probably pretty aware of that. There's no degradation in quality when I look at my graphics on different screens. I can zoom in and see things clearly. And also, we use HTML5 for graphics. Customers have problems with Java sometimes. They might not update it. That might bother them. They might lose graphics. And also, that's a third-party plugin, so it's a cybersecurity vulnerability. So it's another opportunity for us to talk about how our product can eliminate some other people that we compete with. But graphics, obviously, user interface is very important. Standard application library. We had talked about this in here yesterday. Sometimes I don't include this with the engineering presentation because really I think it does a lot for the partner channel and helps us understand how we can be more nimble, how we can save cost on product, installation, all that stuff, speed of putting these things together. It's nice for the engineering community to know that we're making investments in streamlining our labor so we can be more cost effective on their projects. The next one is error balancing in our commissioning tool. This is another thing that we've talked about in here that's great for our technicians in our groups on the partner side. It's also something that the engineering community is interested in because they're aware that the controls group is often, and if not always, the last on site. This gives us the ability to start doing some of this stuff more quickly. It gives us the opportunity to start working on some of this commissioning and balancing in parallel with other trades, so we're not necessarily continually being pushed to the back, and they're not really worried about working with the contractor and dealing with the GC and the owner about, hey, we got to get off this site. We can help on that front with the commissioning tool. We just heard Lee talk about this. There's a lot of really good information. There is a spec available for this right now that actually we will show this afternoon when we do Spec Builder. Really good to get this built into specifications. It's an available software module for us that isn't a great cost, but does provide a lot of value. Historically, if you wanted to bring this information over to the BAS side of things, you had to recreate a lot of information. It cost money. It was a lot of labor. Now we can start streaming in information on our water, air, gas, electric, steam. We can start getting information on dashboarding and how we're performing this year versus last year, and all sorts of resource consumption. And really interestingly, talking today about identifying issues with utility bills. It's a great way to get closer to your customer when you say, hey, looks like we can save you money on something very silly through utility bills. So this is a great module and something that is very cool to talk to the engineering community about. And again, to kind of bring this home to how this conversation might be valuable for you and your community, this is something where we can come back and give a demo. It's something where we could have Lee give a WebEx, another full hour, bring lunch, have that consistent relationship with the engineer so that we're consultative over time and we're building that market presence. We really don't want to be one and done. We want to identify who you have and how we can help your business. SmartX Controller Automation Server Premium. There are two things that I really like to emphasize with this. One is the dual Ethernet port that allows us to do IP-enabled field controls, and we get all the benefits that we talked about before. The other is, this is one of two ways that we can really answer that question of, hey, how open are you guys? Are you open? That everybody asks, right? Has anybody ever asked you that? Are you guys open? What happens with that? The automation server, out of the box, without licensing, can communicate in a lot of different valuable and functional ways. BACnet, LAN, Modbus, web services so we can get energy information, we can get weather information. EcoStruxure web services, which serves us up through that smart connector and really gives us that smart building approach where, again, if somebody comes up with a third-party application that can make the building better, we can connect via Smart Connector and EcoStruxure Web Services and bring that into our offering for the customer. So product-wise, this is a very open device, particularly relative to the engineering community that cut their teeth on proprietary networks and customers getting mad and them not liking that. It opens up a lot of eyes when they realize you can do BACnet and LAN, for instance, out of the same controller out of the box. So we really like to emphasize that for the automation server. Also, that device can be used as a controller in and of itself, where we take a power supply, the automation server premium, and we build that I/O off of it, 400 some points, up to 32 modules. We can throw that onto an air handling unit. We can then run communication off of the automation server to all of the VAV boxes that are underneath it. And so we have that kind of network controller and simply controller in one. That's a pretty cool feature and is future thinking and forward. And then I don't know if you guys are aware, but we're launching SmartX IP controllers. Obviously, this is something that I like to talk a little bit more about with the engineers so that they're aware of, okay, are we just running different wire, or does this actually matter? And we've got a nice little way of showing that we can do our MPVs 7.9 point. We've got our MPX, MPC controllers that come in their 15, 18, 24, 36 point. They're configurable. Whatever the engineer dreams up in terms of sequences and point list, we map those controllers with it, and we get that benefit of data speed, data collection, cybersecurity, design flexibility for architecture. We talked a little bit about that, and you guys answered the questions about kind of how you would run that network. Also, the fact we get more into the IP world and we can start using some of those industry standards. So if we have a problem in the field bus with our network, we're not troubleshooting MSTP for what Babek says is between 9 and 50 hours on average. We can start to diagnose that stuff quicker, and we're up to speed with IT professionals. Also a great opportunity to tell the engineering community we will be having more discussions moving forward with IT. We all need to kind of bone up on that knowledge and get better with networking. There are people here in this room that are excellent at it. We all need to continue to grow with it. It's not going away. It's going to be central to the things that we're doing. So that's a great way for us to consult and improve the engineering community. These are those flexible topologies. This is very similar to the exercise we had. Okay, are you going to run daisy chain? Are you going to run a ring topology? Are you going to home run everything? It's an opportunity for us to make the engineering community aware that, yes, there are more IP controllers. That doesn't mean that we're going to need to have all these new IP points up on the network that the IT folks are going to be upset about. We can subnet that and have it separate. We can start using this for the converged networks that we're seeing a lot in New York, where our systems are starting to inform one another, whether that's the elevator system and the security system and the HVAC system. We can start doing the converged networks. But really, it's an opportunity for us, again, to say there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat. We're going to have this conversation, and ultimately, it's a conversation that we can come up with between yourself, the engineer, the owner, and ourselves with our technological capabilities. And then EcoStruxure Building Expert. I mentioned Ralph Beaudry earlier. I think I've got a second here to give a little bit of a plug on that. This is where you start getting into buildings that are 100,000 square feet or less. If you've got engineers that are doing light commercial, residential, potentially a tenant fit out, historic buildings are a good application for this because we get to use wireless, and it allows us to not really mess with any of the existing building. It's a product line that we can implement for that type of approach. Ralph is somebody who has come through and given presentations to engineers after me based on interest that those engineers have gained through this type of presentation that allows you to stay in front of that engineering community and build that presence. Because ultimately what we want is specs to come out with Schneider Electric in them so it's easier for you to bid more jobs and get better preference and position in more jobs. We're also moving into the VRF sphere. VRF was killing me in Pittsburgh when I was selling, with VAV kind of being replaced by a lot of VRF jobs, and really my only opportunity being a BACnet interface into that system and not a lot of visibility. We're trying to get more into the space. So we're partnering with LG and Panasonic between Schneider Electric and those folks to try and get more VRF business and move more into that realm. That falls under Ralph's group and Building Expert. Now, the last portion, which I really do believe is the most important thing. We can have the products and services and all this stuff. Bottom line, as you all know, it comes down to how you service that customer, the relationships that you have built that are so valuable over time. Really, we need to drive home the fact that we are a human-oriented business and we're trying to help them. So the first thing I'd like to introduce is our Eco Expert channel. Obviously, we're all familiar with that here. We have 185-ish partners throughout the country. We have 12 to 15 branches. Most of our cities are represented by multiple partners. All of our partners have a level of certification. They have a level of qualification, expertise. These are folks that we've worked with, as you all know, and many of you are, that we've worked with for years and years and years. So our partner channel and the way we go to market is not a fly-by-night thing. It's a heavily vetted, highly invested in process and priority for the company. That's how we service our markets, and there's a lot of benefits for that. Each market is served by people that might have expertise in certain vertical markets, so we can cover a market really well that way. We also have, kind of on the open thing, we have the opportunity competitively in markets so that customers are aware, okay, Schneider Electric, there are multiple partners in there. If there's some horrific falling out, engineers are really sensitive of that. They're aware of Siemens and JCI are some of the big gorillas in the room, and it just being our way or the highway and kind of a bad relationship they've had in the past. They're aware of the kind of open, hey, we can do everything, we can pick up this line and do it in a few weeks or a month. We like to think that we sit in a happy medium with the products and services we've been talking about, with the investment in this channel and the relationship we have with the partners, that we have, like on that spectrum, a nice opportunity in every market to really serve the engineering community with the way we do that. Also, we have some third-party validation from folks like Navigant and Verdantix. These are leading analysts in technology. I usually take this opportunity to say, I can jump up and down and talk about products and services. That's kind of what my job is. It's really important to use these type of references and see Schneider Electric up and to the right against our competition in terms of execution and strategy, in terms of being able to optimize facilities and do kind of building energy management stuff. Here are some things that I think are really exciting. Obviously, Trane, Siemens, Johnson Controls, folks like that we're used to seeing. I find that to be cool that we're where we want to be versus them. I also like seeing some startups there, and kind of it positions this as an interesting space. And also IBM, people that are really investing in AI and analytics, getting into the building space. It allows us to think a little bit more freely and openly and creatively about some of the value that we're creating and how we can make the world and buildings better. And we're well positioned in this presentation. I also think when we change this over, I believe 2018, we also got that position in Navigant, but we'll have to check into that. Proficient is a platform that we invite our engineering community to after all of these presentations on the next day. We'll send a PDF of what we discussed, and then I will send a link to Proficient that says, here's an online portal for you. You can access this as an engineering firm. You can get training. You can request CEUs and PDHs. You can start looking at white papers and data sheets and getting access to resources through an online platform, make requests, learn more about Schneider Electric, and use that. Engineers can actually connect and communicate with other engineers that are working on similar types of systems throughout the world. It broadens their network and gives them more power. So we really do like the idea of getting them involved in this platform. And it's a big emphasis of one of the kind of takeaways we like to get out of these meetings. Another thing that will be available through this, and we'll discuss this afternoon, is a spec builder that Jeremy McCullough from our team has worked on. Engineers have been asking for that. I've already, through Greg Peterson, been able to talk to an engineering firm about that. I know that ESC and Lauren and her team was interested in that the very first time I went in and talked to that partner. So this is something that we'll be able to offer that we think will be very valuable. We'll share case studies so that they can look into some of the things that we do. I'm not, hey, let's watch the Edge video guy, but I will send that afterwards. So you can get a feel for, hopefully we've built a vision. Now you can look at that video and see how that might be applied. That's obviously valuable to them. And then the last thing I believe, the last thing I'm sharing with you all is our team. So I cover the Northeast. Other people can fill in for me if I'm busy. My schedule does get busy due to the travel. I'm the guy in the top right that looks like Neil Patrick Harris dressed as a librarian. And I get to talk to people all the time. So I really do appreciate the opportunity. I try to get out and communicate this message as best we can. This is a great place to start. But again, cybersecurity, BAS 101 for people that have interns or just need to get back into controls and aren't familiar with how controls actually work. Automated fault diagnostic and detection. Any of the segues to energy expert or whatever we change things names to, right? Any of that, we can kick that out and kind of keep that relationship in place and hopefully help you build a consultative relationship with your developer, contractor, engineer, and user community. So with that, thank you for your time. I'll open it up to questions, and please do, let's contact each other and try to get out and see people.
Thoughts, questions?
Where am I on time?
Somebody over here also?
I have a statement. It's
Okay.
like Johnny Cash is who I would listen to on music.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever, dude. I heard Taylor the other day in the car on the way from the airport.
That was just the radio.
Lonnie's got one back there.
Lonnie? Did everybody hear the question? How often are you running into consultants that have already completely shifted to IP? Raise of hands. Do you know some of the consultants that have?
Oh,
you're.
I know an answer.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were asking.
Well, the audience is good too. I have 2 consultants right now that we've worked with nationally that their specs are 100% IP. For any new, I'm going to call it greenfield or new project that they're working on, and I'm going to call it a high performance building. Which is typically these consultants work in that field, and it's typically not like K through 12 or something. These are customers and developers that want a high efficient building. And I asked them because actually one of the conversations we had was obviously we have a good overview, but one of the topics we could have is just purely on IP, and that's what this consultant wanted.
Yep.
I mean, so the whole presentation is simply just IP, and we had to go through the pros and cons of the different architectures. So we had to go through that with them. And then we had to also go through cybersecurity. Then we had to go through private versus public network. Okay, that's a big deal. So there's competitors out there that cannot do that. And if you think about going all IP, whether that be today, tomorrow, or in 5 years, if you can't privatize that network, the customer is not going to want to see 300 IP addresses on his network. And if you know any the history about BACnet IP, they won't, trust me. So you've got some real issues with public versus private. So those are the kind of conversations we're having. And I asked the consultant, why is your spec going to that level? I'm just curious myself. And his answer was that we are making the assumption that your system's going to be in our buildings for the next 20 to 30 years. And I don't know what the technology is going to be, like Tyler said, in 5. And when I said, well, what do you mean technology? Well, things in the room, the meeting rooms, the office areas. You know, there's things that are being added that don't really relate to our industry. You know, whether it be tying into a projector, and I'm making this stuff up as I go, but maybe it's Amazon. So there's some hotels in Vegas right now that every room has an Amazon Alexa. And you talk to it. And if you go up to our lab in BOC, we talk to Alexa. Now, if you go to healthcare, they're doing a lot of things on temperature of the color, or color temperatures, and how people feel with color. Penn Med is dealing with that right now of how people, I'm going to say, get better or wellness, and how much they recover based on temperature or color. And they call it temperature, which I'm not an expert on color. But anyway, so Philip Hue, we actually integrate to Philip Hue. So we're doing things in a space that we normally haven't done. So their answer is we don't know what the technology is, but I know that if I put in a serial connection in my space, I'm going to be very limited on what data I can pull in.
So I think that that's often going to be driven through the owners and developers and people that are looking at it that way. And I also think we're in the region that's going to drive that likely for the rest of the country with the cities that are here. The engineering community will start biting off on IP, but we all know the engineering community, it's not the most fast-moving, aggressive, ambitious industry. They're conservative. So we still run into a lot of, at the same token, that, okay, this is why it's important and why you need to be aware of it. But it'll happen quick. And it's getting us into that, as Brad mentioned, it's getting us into that end user experience, drawing us out of the boiler room and into the day-to-day lives of our customers, which is fantastic.
Brad, how many consultants has the team visited this year again?
In Q1, we have visited our team of 5 plus myself, 237 across the country.
Yeah, I'm really tired.
I see.
Our office is the airport.
Yeah. What's going on? I saw a hand. Oh.
Yeah, I wondered if we have access to the Proficient website, and
Yes.
you need a login and password.
Yeah. So we have a login and password that we can get to you all. That's a generic Schneider.
In fact, when we
access.
get to the spec tool, one of the things that we kind of had to take away from some of the other innovation days was that people have or our partners have a hard time finding stuff on Exchange. They were pretty vocal about it. You guys are pretty quiet. So what we do to prove our point is when we get to the spec writer tool, we'll show you on Exchange how you can get to our Proficient website from Exchange. And it will also show you how to get to the spec writer tool from Exchange, so you know how to find it.
And we'll also have a session just on finding assets and stuff and all that good stuff here in a little bit too.
And the other thing we do based on that too is if you watch Impact News, which, you know, that's probably what, 10% actually read it? That's a joke, right? You guys read Impact News at all? Okay. Every night before you go to bed, no, he comes out on Thursdays. Anyway, we try to advertise our efforts on Impact News. I think that's really our best avenue to tell you what's going on. So the reason I say that is this whole Proficient program we just talked about, we're doing a webinar on that later this year, this summer. There's also a session, if you didn't know, Jesse's going to do one on cybersecurity coming up in May. So we basically have one every month as some type of subject. The one on cybersecurity, I highly recommend you attend. So you've got that, and then we have one coming up on our spec writer tool and how to use it. And when we invite folks, we invite all of our channel, you guys, and we invite all the consultants that have registered on Proficient. And so to give you an attendance idea, when we do these webinars, the last one we did in December, we had 700 people register and 400 people attend.
And just so you know, those webinars, I'll just review it, are on the Innovation Day page. The link for registering for all of the sales webinars are on the Innovation Day page.
Mr.
Good
Buckner,
question.
We got one.
Hey, I'm Brian Buckner, a regional. So I work with Tyler a lot. And one of the things I don't think you guys have talked about, or at least I didn't hear it anyway, is I've been thanked on several occasions walking out of an engineer's office because we're not going in and pitching a product. We're going in and we're talking about topics that are relevant to our industry and generally the things that they're going to be coming across. So again, Tyler said we talk about cybersecurity. We talk about BAS 101, which, shocker, are the two most often given presentations we do, at least in the Mid-Atlantic markets. You know, so they thank me because I'm not coming in and saying, hey, let me show you my controller and all that cool, neat stuff it does, because when we look at it that way, I mean, what are they really getting from it? But whenever we walk out and they understand that cybersecurity is about to be really important to them, or that, you know, whatever, macro trends, right? We're telling them what the industry is doing, and they're thankful because we're not coming in there with this agenda to just pitch our own product.
And then the expectation, which has worked really, really well, I think, and we're building a good approach in this market, is you all then can call on that engineer and say, hey, we'd like to be back in a month. What kind of projects are you working on? Can we help you with anything? Did any of that resonate? You asked about building expert. Is that because you're working on a smaller building? And we're finding opportunities that otherwise we wouldn't. And we're getting into specs that historically we haven't been in. So we're just in more job opportunities through the market. So that's the goal and the idea. So that's perfect, Brian.
Was there a question over here? No? Okay. All right.
I'm cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm good. Yeah.
nice job. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.